In this video, I want to pause on Firebase, talk about what we built so far and what we're going to build next with Firebase. So we've learned enough of the basics of Firebase that we can start putting it together into a more complete application. So what we built before we got into Firebase was this client-side quiz application, which this hit the open trivia database, this trivia database that we found online, and pulled in questions in JSON format. So we're able to ask for these from our React application, throw them into the application, and get our formatted game that you could play through those and get a score at the end, and time the player and all that jazz. So that's what we built. That was completely client-side, completely reliant on the Open Trivia Database API. What we want to move to doing now is, instead of relying on the Open Trivia database, we want to build our own backend for a quiz platform that uses Firebase. So we'll use Firebase to log in and log out using Firebase authentication, and we will use Firebase Cloud Firestore for storing our quizzes in the platform. So what we want to do is transform this client-side application that we've got here to a platform where users can log in, look through quizzes that are in the platform, select one they want to play, and also where users can make their own quizzes and publish them to the platform. So if you're thinking about other apps that are out there, it might be like Quizlet or apps in that vein where anyone can come in and make whatever they want. So someone might come in and make a study application for JavaScript, and someone else might come in and make a Pokemon trivia application, Pokemon trivia quiz within our application. So with that context, what I want to do is open up a blank whiteboard here and go through the process of mapping out this new application we're going to build. So we'll do a sitemap together, and then we'll talk about the database structure that we're going to use. So a sitemap is a really simple information architecture structure where you try to map out where information sits in your application. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a goofy little name for our app at the top, put that in a box, and then off of this box I want to draw some branches that would represent the different features in our application or the different pages in our application. So we could have any number of things in this application. I'm going to try and keep it simple for us now with just 4 pages in our application. So we're going to have a home page. That'll be where users log in. And when a user is logged in, it gives them their account dashboard. So shows them the quizzes that they've played recently, or the quizzes that they've created recently. So that'll be one page. Another one will be quizzes. So on this page, what we want to do is display the quizzes that are in our database, that are in our platform, so that users can select one that they want to play. And we'll also have some kind of search, sort, filter on that page as well. And then we'll have a play quiz page, which is going to be very similar to what we've already built in the client-side application. This is where you just load up an individual quiz and play it. So play individual quiz. And then we will also have an edit quiz route here, or page. And this is where we will be able to edit an existing quiz or create and edit a new quiz. So that's the plan. We're going to have these 4 pages, login, dashboard, the listing of all the quizzes, the ability to play one quiz, and the ability to edit or create quizzes. So this is a general structure for a sitemap, is trying to figure out your features and listing them under where they would live in your application. And this is a good process to go through as you're planning your own applications. If you want to take this a step further, what I also recommend doing is like some little thumbnail sketches of what things might look like on each of those pages. So I'll do that really quickly and add that in here too. And these can be really low fidelity. This just gives us a little bit of a rough framework to use when we go to build the application. So for the home page, oh boy, we're gonna have two versions here. One is going to be the version where, display some information about the platform, and then there's a big old login button to get people to sign into our platform. And then there'll be another version which will have the dashboard. And that dashboard will have whatever we want to put on it. Maybe it'll be the player's stats for the most recent quiz they completed, or it'll be a bunch of cards here that tell you the list out the quizzes that the user has created within the platform. So that's our home page. Then our quizzes page, if I do a little thumbnail sketch here, this would be the page where you find a quiz. So we'll probably want to have eventually some kind of search settings. Maybe there's a drop down here that allows you to sort by tag, and maybe there's another one here that allows you to sort by the difficulty. And then below that, we would have the results. So we would display cards here for whatever quizzes match those search settings. Running out of room. One general piece of advice here would be, go bigger than I'm going with these thumbnail sketches. That gives you more room to play. And this card here, maybe I'll say there'd be the quiz title at the top. And some details in here about the quiz, and then some play button here that allows the user, oh boy, come on, to go play the quiz. So that's our quizzes page. Display a bunch of quizzes in the platform and search, sort, filter through them. Our play quiz, we already know what this looks like because we've already built this. It'll be basically what we've built already, except with an added intro screen that has a little bit of stats about the game before the user jumps into playing the game. And then the edit quiz, this will probably be the most complicated one of the pages that we build, but this will be one where the user can edit or create quizzes within our platform. So that means that they will have entries that they can fill in for like the title and tags and difficulty, and also forms here for actually entering in all of the questions and adding questions and removing questions and sorting the questions within the quiz. So there we go. That's our sitemap with our really low fidelity thumbnails to go along with each route. This helps us as we're jumping into the platform with actually figuring out where stuff should go. Just doing this process, we know we're going to at least have a folder for each of these things in our React application for each of these routes. One for home, one for quizzes, play quiz, and one for edit quiz. So this is a good start for planning. The other thing that I would recommend doing when planning out your application is thinking about your data structure. What are you going to need? And since we're working inside of Firebase here, we're going to have collections that are filled with documents. And collections for us in this application, the most obvious one would be quizzes. We need some place to store the individual quizzes that we put into our platform. And we might also want to consider, depending on how much time we have, building a collection of users where we could store their individual scores. Every time they play a quiz, we'd store, oh, they played this quiz. Here's the score they got. This is when they played that. And anything else you want to store about users in your application. The bigger the application grows, probably the more collections and sub-collections you would have in your application, but this should be enough to get us started with what we've mapped out here for our quiz platform. So with the idea of what collections we need, it's also good to think about your documents. So the documents are how we store individual collections of data, a set of fields together inside of our collection. So you can kind of think of, if you want a metaphor, your collection is your folder, and then your document are your individual pages in that folder. So for this, what I recommend doing is thinking about what are the pieces of data that you want to store for each thing that's in your application. So our quizzes collection is going to have a set of quiz documents in it. And our users collection might also have a set of user documents in it. And so we want to think through what's the structure of each of those things. What are the fields within a quiz? What are the data types for those fields? And same thing for our users. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and write down some of the things that I think we want to store under quiz and user, and then I'll unpause the video and we'll come back and take a look at it. And we're back here. Okay, so I paused it just so that you don't have to watch me slowly write things out, but I've put a few things under the quiz and under the user. And the structure that I'm using here is I'm going to put the name of the field, and then I'm going to put the type, the data type next to it. So starting out thinking about the quiz, there are a lot of things that we might want to store about the quiz in our platform. Surely it's going to need a title, something that we can display, here in our quiz title, also on our play page. We probably also want a description so that users can say like, oh, this is a quiz to help you study for a HTML, CSS job interview, or this is a quiz to help you study for your biology class, or whatever it is. We want a place for the user to be able to put that in. Difficulty would maybe be a nice thing to add in there. That's not necessary in kind of our sketch, but would be a cool thing to have so that users can rank the difficulty. And all of these I'm thinking of as strings. So title, that seems self-explanatory, and description seems self-explanatory for string. Difficulty, here I'm thinking they can enter in easy, medium, hard, or whatever scale we want to use. You might also think about storing that as an int, like on a scale from 0 to 10, or whatever you want to use. That's kind of up to you. There's a lot of design decisions that are happening here as we're planning out how to store things in our database. And luckily, one of the things that's nice about Firebase and working with NoSQL databases is that we can iterate pretty quickly on these ideas. We can come up with this mapping of data, and as soon as we start building, if we decide we want to change something, that's pretty easy to do. We can just come back in and throw a new document into the database that has our new data structure. Okay, so title, description, difficulty, those are good. Owner ID and owner name, these are who's the person that created this quiz. So the owner ID would be their unique identifier so that we can locate them in our application. This will be useful for security purposes to make sure that when someone opens up a quiz for editing, they are the owner. And then owner name is a nice thing to throw in here so that we can display it easily on our results page. Like this is the JavaScript quiz by Mike, or whoever created that quiz. I'm also going to want to store some information about when the quiz was modified. So I'm storing a timestamp here for when it was created, and a last modified timestamp here for the last time it was changed. Those are just generally useful things to have in your application. And if you're wondering where some of these things are coming from, if you remember back to when we were introducing Firebase, Firestore here, rather, has a number of primitive data types that it can handle. So it can handle arrays and Boolean, and then date and time. That's where I'm putting timestamp here. The class is actually called timestamp when we get into storing a timestamp. So that's why I'm putting timestamp here in our diagram. And you can see that I'm trying to store an array here, and that's where array is coming in. So you can also look through this and think about other things that you might need to store. Like if you're creating a platform that needs latitude and longitude, there is a class that's built into Firestore for that. So keeping this handy as you're thinking about your database design is a good idea. So that's our timestamp, and then I want to store tags, like what are the topics in this quiz. It might be that like tags are programming and entertainment and film and movies, whatever we want to create as our keywords, which will then make it easy for us to do some searching and filtering based on those tags. And then here, an array of questions. And so I am kind of making an imaginary type here. You can see that I'm using types that have existed, like string and timestamp, in our previous examples. And this one, I said this is an array of strings by adding brackets to the end. Question here, I'm kind of making up that there's a new type that we're going to create. And that is going to be something that is an object that has a question field that has the text of the question. Oops, so this would be a string. It has a spot for the correct answer. Which would also be a string, and then an array of incorrect answers. And this kind of maps to what we've been doing already, so we'll be able to reuse some of our code that we built, and that is coming from the Open Trivia database, where the structure of a lot of these is storing the question, correct answer, incorrect answers. So I'm constraining things at the moment to say like, oh, we're always going to have this structure for our questions. So they're always multiple choice questions. We could always expand upon that as we're going and kind of iterate on what we're trying to create here. So if we had another type, like a fill in the blank question, or a specifically true-false question, we could add multiple types here that could be in our array of questions. So that's our quiz. And one thing that I'll say is that I'm going with a really simple structure for our quiz document where there are no sub-collections. And when we're getting started, that's an okay way to go. But at some point, we may actually want, depending on what we need our application to do, to break some of these out into collections or sub-collections. Like our tags, if we need to know what are all the tags in our application, then it doesn't really make sense for us to store an array of strings in each quiz. What we probably want to do is create another collection here for all of the tags that are allowable or are defined in our quiz platform, and then just point to the tag here in our array using the ID of the document in our collection. So this will be good for starting out, and just keep in mind that we may refactor this as our needs of our application grow. And I've also mapped out the user over here. We're probably not going to build this for a bit, so I'm not super worried about the structure of the document here, but just to give you an example, we might have the user's actual name here. We might have their preferred username that they want to go by in our application. And then we might have things that are user data related, like maybe they've starred a bunch of quizzes within our platform to favorite them for easy access later. And so what we might store there is an array of the IDs of our quiz documents. So every document has its own unique ID. So we would just be storing the IDs here so that we could locate those quizzes later. So that's our structure. I recommend going through this process, and you can also use the web console to kind of map out some of your documents, and you can, just create a document and then you have access to all of the different types that are in Firebase. And so you can make a couple mock ones to test your idea for what your data model should be. That's a good process. And I've also got pulled up here, because I went through this process myself, a few example quizzes. So you can see here's our created at timestamp that we were saying we would need here. And here's our difficulty setting. And here's the last modified timestamp. And here's the owner ID, which allows us to know who was the owner, who's the account that created this quiz. And then we've got an array of tags down here and an array of questions, where each question is something like this, where what is the file extension for a JavaScript file, correct answer .js, and then a bunch of incorrect answers. All right, so let's zoom out here. So hopefully what we've done is given ourselves a roadmap here for what we're going to be creating. We went back to our client-side app and then sort of built out a bigger sitemap of what should this whole platform look like that's powered by our own database, our own backend, and our own data structure. So doing a sitemap is a really useful thing for planning out that application, and then also trying to list out the structure of your database and play with it in the web console are good techniques for mapping out the structure of your application. So that's it for this video. What we will start doing now is diving into actually making these pages and making not just our toy examples of interacting with Firebase and the different Firebase services, but put them in the context of this whole platform that we're going to be building.